Greetings, Dr. Alderman and Marcia and class members. I'm submitting my video to explain one of the four authors that I'm using for my project at Goshen Church. Many of you may be familiar with the author that I'm using, and the book particularly that I'm interested in is this one, which is A Black Theology of Liberation. And of course, it's by James Cone. And I hope you can see that. There you go. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the book. But what's dynamic is the Black Theology of Liberation, the contents and the movement and the thoughts. So I've taken an interest in this because I'm in a all-black church. I attend an all-black church and actually serve as the lay associate pastor there. And I have been there a number of years, like 3. And prior to that, I was at an all-black church in Kankakee where I was associate pastor. So I have had the pleasure, joy, and also indirect sorrow of the members in these all black churches who are dealing with the struggles of oppression and discrimination and numerous related problems around the fact of the discrimination, and especially what's happening in the church. And as I observe the lack of the utilization of the power of Black liberation, it is not spoken from our pulpit. It is not brought forth as something that our members could understand and identify and join together, band together as a voice with their church leaders to bring about true liberation for Black Christians, Black believers, and extend that to so many others that are within the church and without the church, or outside the church. In terms of discrimination experienced, as we all know, in terms of gender and race and just size and lifestyle and sexual preference changes, and there's so many dynamics. So I am, as I said, in that context, and so want to look at truly what is Jesus to the members of my church. As you go through this book, it was originally, the original edition was written, or the first edition was written in 1970s when the civil rights movement was really, starting to take effect in our local society. But what's interesting is Christ's message, who I see as representation and equal with God. And I know that God is the God of the underdog. So there would be absolutely no question that Jesus, who was oppressed back then and is still being oppressed now through his loved ones, his children, would be in the forefront of pronouncing how Black theology is and will liberate those who are severely and to any degree oppressed and discriminated upon. So, as I said, the book arose during the civil rights time, but years later, and now probably looking, that's more than 40 years, but we see that this work retains its original power. And James Cone wrote a preface to the 1970 edition, And then he did another edition in 1986, and he wrote a preface to that. And then the content actually is that, in a nutshell, that Christian theology is above all things a theology of liberation. And there can be no Christian theology that is not identified unreservedly with those who are humiliated and abused. And God is a God for all, and for all those especially who are heavy laden and burdened and suffer under oppression of, of any type. Um, so God is revealed to us as the God of the oppressed. And throughout this book, we see that there's, specifically a black theology. And um, it's mentioned in 2 points here that first, there can be no theology of the gospel which does not arise from an oppressed community. And secondly, black theology is Christian theology because it centers on Jesus Christ. And I find that the members in my church are really, for the few that I've surveyed, are not aware of the the initial movement and continuing growth and reality of black theology. So my hopes in my project are to incorporate liberation theology, specifically black theology, and combining that with process theology to present to them and um, expand um, their awareness of how truly Jesus Christ, as in my proposition statement, that Jesus Christ and the black theology, I'm sorry, not the black, well, black theology, but the black Jesus as the living Word of God will liberate and does liberate all those who suffer oppression. So that just gives you barely a little nutshell into all that my author has to offer on this topic as he talks about um, the sources and norm of black theology, the meaning of revelation, God in black theology, the human being in black theology, and Jesus Christ in black theology, the church, the world, and eschatology in black theology. And those are a good number of the topics that we're all going to be covering in our project. So thank you for letting me give you an introduction as I'm still formulating the exact structure that this will take once I struggle with what I know I have a desire to express to assist my church members, and I have 4 good authors to help me accomplish that. The other authors I'm using are Sutaki for process theology, and I'm also using Plaskow and sorry, and Rebecca Chop, which is the praxis of suffering, and that's an interpretation of liberation and political theology. But primarily, this video is to express my initial author, James Cone, which I know many of us admire and are familiar with, and just the dynamism that he has to offer of the truths of what black theology can offer us today, um, and by us meaning especially the black community that deserves liberation. Thank you so much.